G'day and welcome to another video with Better Pics. Hope this finds you all well. Today's video we're having a look at Adobe Camera Raw. This is the latest version of Adobe Camera Raw and the 10 tools within Adobe Camera Raw that I use for editing every single image. Now, needless to say, there are definitely a whole range of tools that I use for images, and many of them I use on most images, but the 10 tools that I wanted to talk about today are the standard edits that I make for every single image, regardless of what that image is, every single time. As I've made these 10 tools my standard approach, what I found over the years by refining my edit process and my edit workflow is that I'm able to edit a large number of images much more efficiently and quickly, and I'm able to spend less time at the desk working on these images, and I'm able to deliver them quicker and with more consistency. Let's talk a little bit about my workflow initially though. Now, I do shoot completely manually. Now, I'm not in any way saying that anybody else should shoot completely manually, because there's a whole bunch of ways to arrive at capturing an image. But for me, shooting manually means that I have absolute control over the results that I get. Now, is it the most efficient way to shoot? Not always. Does it get me the best results? Based on the amount of time that I've been doing it, I find that it does, because I'm taking absolute control over the outcome. Now, there's definitely professional photographers that I've met over the years. Some of them are my friends who don't shoot fully manually and they get great results and their workflow works for them. But the reason that I shoot fully manually, particularly when it comes to editing a large number of images, is that I'm able to, within the body of work that I've shot, I'm able to apply base adjustments to all images at the same time and sync those settings, and it helps me to have a more consistent process of editing those images and consistent results quicker. And these 4 images are a perfect example. These 4 images were all shot with the same settings, so you can see they were shot with a drone. We've got ISO 100. It's a fixed focal length, so we don't need to talk about that. Aperture is f6.3 and 1/640th of a second. If we go to the second image, exactly the same settings. We go to the third image, exactly the same settings. And of course, with the fourth image, exactly the same settings. Now, this is a situation where the consistency of the light allows me to shoot with the same settings, and not all situations will allow that. If you're shooting wildlife and they're moving between really bright sunshine and really dark shadows, then you're obviously going to need to make some exposure adjustments. If you're shooting a conference where you have bright stage lights and you're also shooting the audience, which may be under darker lighting, then you're going to need to make some adjustments. But for the majority of situations, particularly with landscape where I'm working for a period of time under consistent lighting, this process definitely works. So let's have a look at those 10 edit tools that I use within Adobe Camera Raw on every single image. And what I'm going to do is select this top image, and I'm also going to select the other 3, so you can see all 4 images are selected. Now, the first one is under the Light tab, and it is, of course, exposure. Pretty much every image that I shoot, I'm going to make a slight exposure adjustment. It's not that I'm not able to get the correct exposure in camera, it just means that when I bring it into post-production, I just want to refine it that little bit further. I'm a bit of a stickler for detail, and I try to be as much of a perfectionist as possible, and it may only be a tiny adjustment. It may be sometimes +5 or -5 on the exposure, but it just means that I've got the exposure or the brightness of the image exactly where I want it to be. All right, that's the first one. Next one is contrast. With my images, I naturally set color profiles and image profiles in camera to be quite flat, and that's just to give me as much flexibility in post. So I'll usually bump the contrast, and I'll usually start at +30. And I just find across all the cameras that I have, that the settings that I have for the images in camera, that +30 is a good starting point. It's not too contrasty, but it just helps to give a little bit of boost to the image. So contrast is set to +30. If I need to go through and refine the images individually, then I can make micro adjustments outside of that. But as a starting point for all images, +30 is the way that I go. The next setting that I make adjustments to for every single image is the highlights, and what I generally do is just drop the highlights by about -30, and that just helps to bring in those highlights if they're a little bit overexposed, particularly for stuff like these white buildings or clouds or whatever brighter parts of the image that it may be. And as a contrast to highlights, I also make adjustments to the shadows. Now, what I'll normally do is just bring the shadows up a little bit, not a lot. I usually start at +5, and I find that for the color profile that I have my camera set to, that +5 for shadows is generally enough. That's all I need. It's just a little boost to the shadow areas. But of course, if I need to go through individual images later on and refine that, then +5 is a good starting point. Alright, what we're going to do now is move down to the color tab, and the fifth adjustment that I make to every single image is the temperature. So just the temperature slider there. Generally I try to shoot at a color temperature that matches the scene that I'm shooting in. So obviously for this one it was daylight, but I do make adjustments in post again just to make sure that I get the image exactly where I want it to be. Generally for daylight I like to warm it up just a little bit, so we're going to go about 6,700 Kelvin. And I find that that's a good place to go. Obviously this is dependent on the camera and the scene, but as a starting point, that's usually where I set my temperature. For the tint, I tend to increase my tint with magenta to about +10. And this is again dependent on the camera. For my Canon cameras I might go up to +13 or 14, but for this particular drone I go up to about +10, and I find again that's a very good starting point and a standard adjustment that I make. The next one is vibrance. So vibrance and saturation are the 7th and 8th settings that I make adjustments to. I tend to use vibrance a little bit more, so I start at +30, and you can see that's just giving the colors a little bit more intensity, but it's not oversaturating colors, so different color values respond differently to vibrance and saturation, and vibrance tends to work only on colors that the software deems to be less saturated, so it's bringing it up to more of a standard with each other across the board for what's in the image, whereas saturation applies equal amounts of color intensity across all parts of the image. So I tend to add a little bit less saturation than the vibrance, so about +30 for vibrance and +10 for saturation. So that's the first 8 settings that I use on every single image. So exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, temperature, tint, vibrance, and saturation. And you can see already the image is looking much, much better than what it did when we started. Alright, the next one we're going to go down to the detail tab. And what I do is apply some sharpening. So one of the profile settings that I make in camera is to reduce the sharpening, because it's something that I like to apply to images in post-production. I just find that it gives me a little bit more control and better results if I go that path. And that's because not only the amount of sharpening that we can apply, but we also apply some masking to not have the sharpening applied across the entire image. It's very important, particularly in situations like this where you've got this beautiful blue sky. You don't need to apply sharpening to a sky. So what we're going to do is apply some sharpening. We're going to go up to say +80. Just as a starting point, and then down below on the masking slider we're going to slide that mask all the way to the right. Now, how do you know how much masking is being applied to the image? Well, if you hold down your Alt key and slide on the masking, you can see the white parts are the parts where the sharpening is being applied, and the dark parts are the parts of the image where the sharpening is not being applied. So you can see that sky is completely removed of any sharpening adjustment, but the buildings and the mountain and the landscape have got sharpening still applied. Now, always a good idea to zoom in to 100% because you can see the absolute detail and benefits of the sharpening that you're applying. And that way you know for certain that you're only applying the sharpening that you absolutely need to. Now, I don't include masking as part of the 10 tools that I use on every image because masking is being used in conjunction with sharpening. So it's not a setting in itself, it's a tool that's used in conjunction with sharpening. So I just wanted to mention that. The last tool that we use on every single image is under our optics tab. And what that is the remove chromatic aberration. Now, Chromatic aberration, which I've done a video about before, is just the either cyan or purple or magenta color fringing that you tend to see on some images. And I pretty much find, even with really good quality expensive lenses, that you do get some color fringing and some chromatic aberration. So it is a very good thing to just apply as a standard. It doesn't have any other negative effect on your image, but it will certainly help to get rid of some or all of that chromatic aberration. It's a very, very good tool. You can actually see up on the top skyline of those trees, there's a little bit of cyan or green fringing there, and if we click on chromatic aberration, it removes pretty much all of it. So that's a perfect example of that tool working in a real situation. Alright, so if we have a look at those 4 images, because the images were all shot under the same lighting and all shot with the same settings, they're pretty much all exactly the same. Now this second and third one, I might actually brighten up a little bit. So let's go up to light and let's go to exposure, and we're just going to increase that just a little bit. There we go, that's better. And increase that just a little bit, that's better. And that one's completely fine. So you can see that even though I've applied the same settings to all 4 images that were all shot roughly at the same time under the same lighting conditions, it still required me to go in and just do a little bit of refinement. But because we've applied all of those settings, those 10 different tools, to all 4 images, it's just a refinement process rather than having to go through each image and reapply the same 10 settings to all of them. So a much quicker process, much more time efficient, and consistent results, which is always a good thing. So let's have a quick look again at those 10 tools. Exposure, contrast, third one is highlights, shadows. Then we go down to the color tab. We've got temperature, tint, vibrance, and saturation. Then if we go down to the detail tab, we have sharpening, and of course masking used in conjunction with sharpening. And then down to the optics tab, we have remove chromatic aberration, which, as I mentioned, you'll find there's generally some evidence of chromatic aberration in all of your images. Now, even if you don't have chromatic aberration, it's, as I said, it's not going to have any negative effect on your image, but it at least allows that issue to be taken care of if it is there. Now, as I mentioned, there are a load of other tools that I generally use on my edits. Many of them I've already demonstrated on this channel. It's not to say that I don't use those tools for the majority of my images. In some cases, if I've got a batch of images, I might use other tools on all of the images. But generally speaking, I don't use every tool for every image that I edit, aside from those 10 tools that I've just shown you. So I hope that makes sense. And of course, it's worth experimenting with your most common tools that you use and really, refining that process that you use to get the results that you're chasing. As always, any questions are welcome in the comments below. Thanks as always for stopping by, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.